Hey guys, Andy Gideon here. Have finally reached a happy state of the progress for me. Get a little sense of completion here. I got all the control surfaces. They've been primed, filled, and sanded. And now I'm getting ready to do the final shot of primer over them. Kind of go over the steps that I used here. So when these were all done with glass and resin, I brought them here into the shop and I put two very heavy coats of primer on each side. Then once it dried, I took them home, and when I got them home, I took the filler putty before sanding any of the primer down and put the putty in the low spots or to fill in any of the imperfections. Then once the putty dried, I sand the putty down until I start to go through the primer, and then I went ahead and started wet sanding the whole surface with 220, and I sanded until I started seeing the wood color. And that tells me that now I've gotten the low spots level with the high spots. So I didn't want to sand any more because this is telling me that I am now level, or level-ish. It's not perfect. I don't care that it's not perfect. As I said many times before, I've spent a lot of time around full-scale warbirds, especially P-51s, and they are not perfect, not by any means. So before I went ahead and shot the final coat of primer, you'll see there's some tape on there. Now this tape right here, this is 1/64, I think it's just called chart tape or whatever. You get it online, dirt cheap. And this tape outline here is simulating the rudder trim tab. Kind of hard to get it all in view here, but so now the final coat of primer, depending on the paint that I use, I could just paint it the way it is. It'll cover the the difference in the tones. But since the whole airplane is going to be done in silver, I want to make sure I have a good final coat of primer on it. And the other reason for the final coat of primer is I need some primer to be on this tape. I am not going to be removing the tape once it's primed, so it'll be giving the effect of a panel line, but it's not going to be embedded into the surface like I did on my top flight. This is basically just going to be adding a good shadowing effect. So this next coat of primer that's going on is going to be not very heavy because I'm going to be sanding very little of it off. But the main reason for it is to put some primer on this tape, because I don't want this tape peeling off once it's all painted. So it's kind of cold in here. My primer is heating up in front of a heater at the moment, so as soon as it's ready to go, we'll get started. I'm going to try not to get paint on the camera, but I just want to show how light this coat is. It's enough to get a good coverage, but I don't want it to pile on too thick, because at this point, since I'm not going to be sanding a lot of primer off, if I put a ton of primer on there, that's just unnecessary added weight. Oh, by the way, this is the stuff that I use. The Rust-Oleum primer. It's a 2-in-1 filler and primer. Sprays good, sands good. It's convenient. Try not to paint the camera here. Now once this is all dry, I'm going to really lightly wet sand it with 400 grit, just to knock down the roughness of the primer. But then it'll be ready for paint. As soon as this dries up a little bit, I'll bring you back to look at the what the panel lines are going to look like. See you in a second. Okay, now that the primer has settled down a little bit, a lot of the shininess has gone away. If the camera will focus on it, you can see it gives a good shadow effect of the panels, of the lines. Might be kind of hard to see, but they're definitely there. Not bad. Now the best way to figure out where to put these lines, all I do for any of the planes that I've done any kind of detail work on is I just do a Google search, and in this case it was P-51 Mustang 3-view. Do the search, click on images, and hundreds if not thousands of different 3-view illustrations that that show all the panel lines and, you know, locations of the trim tabs, and it makes it really easy to do. Then you just kind of eyeball it and figure out where to put them. It takes a little bit of time, but by no means is it hard. I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So as soon as this dries a little bit more, I'm going to flip it over, do the other side, let them get hardened up really good, and I'll get back to work on the wing and the fuselage later. Well, it may seem like just a second ago I was putting the primer on these things. I got a little excited and decided to go ahead and paint the rudder. And I'd say it turned out pretty well. You can clearly see the trim tab, looks good. This Rust-Oleum paint really flows out nice. It's not fully set up yet. You know, you can see my imperfections in it, but that's got nothing to do with the paint, that's all me. And in case you're wondering on the paint, that stuff right there works really good. Just figured I'd show that to you. Usually when I get to this point on a project, I gotta put some paint on something. So now there is a portion of this airplane that is completely finished. So I'm happy. Later.